Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, I just want to thank everyone for their work getting ready for the presentation here today and for the hearing. We'll be joined with Public Utilities Assistant Director Jonathan Lee and representative from the department. I appreciate you all being here this evening. I also want to thank Steve Gladman, who chairs the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, for informing us of the 2020 utility rate adjustments momentarily. I want to thank members for the public who come down to City Hall, although I don't see too many here this evening. Though we are streaming this hearing online so that folks can be informed about the process. The purpose of this hearing is to review and comment on the proposed 2020 water and sewer rates for the City of Columbus and Central Ohio customers. We'll discuss the department's payment assistance program for low-income residents and seniors who may qualify for reduced rates. This hearing is available live to live stream on CTV and broadcast on Spectrum Channel 1024, WOW Channel 3, AT&T UVerse Channel 99. The video will also be posted on the City of Columbus YouTube channel following this event. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Director Lee to introduce our presenters and get the hearing kicked off. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To start off, I will turn over the microphone to our Chairman of the Sewer Water Advisory Board, Mr. Steve Gladman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Doran. My name is Steve Gladman. I live in 961 Grandview Avenue in Grandview Heights. I serve on the Sewer and Water Advisory Board representing suburban communities, and I currently chair the board. I sent a letter addressed to President Hardin and to yourself earlier. It highlights the recommendations of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board. With your permission, I'd like to read that for the record.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. Dear President Hardin, Councilmember Dorans, members of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board met with representatives of the Department of Public Utilities 4 times in 2019 to review and discuss the operations and project planning activities of the water, sewer, and stormwater enterprises. On our October 23rd meeting, we reviewed proposed water, sanitary, sewer, and storm rates. The board approved the following rate recommendations effective 1 January 2020. For the fiscal year 2020, the board recommends an increase in sanitary sewer rates of 3%, water rates of 3%, and stormwater rates of 2%. When considered together, the bill impact on an average residential customer within the City of Columbus is 2.95%. Overall, this adds approximately $8.46 in charges to a residential customer's bill each quarter, or $33.84 a year. Over the past few years, the board has not raised the extra strength charge per recommendations from our rate study. The board recommends no additional increases to those charges in 2020. The board recommends continuing the surcharge for the sanitary sewer rate known as the Clean River Fee to support payments of expenses related to the construction of projects mandated by the consent orders entered into to eliminate combined sewer and sanitary sewer overflows. This charge is based on measurement of impervious surface area. The equivalent residential unit equals 2,000 square feet of impervious surface area for each residential customer, both inside and outside the city. It is billed 1 ERU per month. Commercial and industrial customers are charged based on the actual measured impervious area. The board also recommends continuing the low-income discount for water and sanitary sewer commodity charges at 20%. The low-income customers are defined as being at 150% of the federal poverty level or qualifying for a state low-income program. The Department of Public Utilities is continuing its outreach efforts to identify customers that have not taken advantage of the low-income program. Lastly, the board recommends no increase in the water and sewer capacity charges for 2020. The board feels that the rate adjustments are fair and equitable and are necessary to provide the funding to support the day-to-day operations of the division, as well as the continuing to support a critical and sizable capital improvement program within the Department of Public Utilities. As always, the board will work with the public utility staff to ensure that the future rate increases are minimized to the extent possible. Sincerely, Steve Gladman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chairman Dorans. I'll go into a little bit more detail about our water and sewer rates and storm rates for 2020. I have a presentation that I'll be referring to as I make my presentation. The first slide just goes into a little bit more detail and illustrates what Chair Gladman was talking about for 2020. Our proposed rates, you can see as we break them down, 3% for water, 3% for sewer, and 2% for storm. So if you take all those rates combined, the impact to a residential bill would be about a 2.95% increase, what they'll see over their 2019 bill. So you can see basically each quarter we bill quarterly, and so they will see a quarterly bill increase of about $8.46, or if you take that on an annual basis, around $33.84. As mentioned, we will no changes to our low-income and senior discount programs. I'll talk a little bit more about those in my presentation. As Chair Gladman noted, the board did meet in late October. We met a little bit later this year just because typically we meet at the end of September, but we were actually able to reduce the rates a little bit due to some refinancing that the city auditor, took advantage of. We refinanced several issuances, so that actually helped save the ratepayers for 2020. As mentioned, there would be no increase in capacity fees or extra strength charges. The capacity fees are tap-in fees to tap into our system for water and sewer, and extra strength. Certain industrial customers are charged a surcharge for extra strength types of discharges into our wastewater collection system, but we're not increasing that. No recommendations for that. Again, this will be an across-the-board type of increase. We have a service charge and commodity charges that are in place right now. All we're doing is just adding those percentages to those increases. They will be effective January 1, 2020, so we have a little bit of time, but that's when it will go into effect. And the amount of revenue that's generated, we can see water will generate about $4.7 million in additional revenue, sewer $6.9 million, and storm about $715,000. A little bit more breakdown when I mentioned the increases, what does that look like? And again, this is based on 30 CCFs. That's generally around about a household of four, residential household of four. So on a quarterly basis, it's estimated that they're currently paying around $286. With that $8.46 increase, it'd be about $295. We also have suburban customers out in the suburban communities. They have a little bit higher charge on the water and sewer side. As you can see there, their estimated bill is about $315, which would be going up to $324 and a quarter, about $9.46 a quarter, or $37.84 annually. Then our low-income residential customers, since they get a reduction on the commodity charge, those that qualify, you can see there that their bill is estimated around $241, going up to $248 a quarter. When you get on the outside in some communities, suburban communities, they do add a surcharge in some cases in order to do capital investments in those communities. And so we actually add that surcharge on top of our charge and bill that way for them. And then we remit that charge back to the community so they can use it to do contracts for capital investment. I will note that we do not charge any stormwater rates for outside city customers. The next slide just goes into a little detail of how we structure our rates, how we go about designing our rates. One of the biggest things that we take into consideration is affordability for residents and commercial businesses as well. What is the bill impact? Because that really what gets down to it. Are they fair and reasonable, and are they equitable? Is our rate structure designed equitably? Are we charging the right components from our service charge and our commodity charges? We also look at water consumption levels. I'll talk a little bit about that and where we are with an account growth. We take that into consideration because we're seeing some trending there, which I'll show you. Aging infrastructure. Our philosophy is to continue to make investments in our infrastructure as well as comply with regulatory requirements, EPA requirements and Clean Water Act and some of our state consent orders. So maintaining a program year over year, not getting behind in schedule on our infrastructure investments. And again, we always have operations and maintenance expenses. Inflation is involved with that, various commodity charges. We have salary increases, healthcare increases, chemical costs, electricity costs. All that is considered as part of our rate modeling. And then finally, certain things with financial targets. We have to maintain a certain credit quality with our investment community whenever we go out to the market to finance these projects. And there's certain ratios that we have to maintain, certain cash balances, reserve levels, things of that nature. This slide gives you a little history of where things have been over the years and where they plan to be. We'd like to give customers an idea of what to plan for. We get a lot of questions. What are the rates going to be in the next few years, the next 5 years, so they can do their budget planning. And you can see there from 2003 to 2012, we had a lot of variation. We had large increases, and that was about the time we entered into our EPA consent orders. We entered into those in 2002 and 2004. We had to ramp up quickly to comply with that. And then as we got moving, we kind of started to level out. We got used to the program. We got some projects under our belt. We started using more of the EPA loan program, which has been a very big benefit to us. And we started, you can see our rate projections going forward they're going to be increasing, but they're going to be more at a level rate. We don't anticipate an aggregate increase much above 4.8%. I'll talk a little bit more about each division, but what's driving some of those rates is our capital program, more so than our operating expenses. The next slide shows a little bit what I talked about, where we are with account versus consumption growth. You can see here that in Columbus, we have had steady account growth. We've had customers. There's a lot of construction going on, a lot of residential construction going on, businesses moving into the area. So our account growth has been strong. But as you can see there, water consumption has declined quite a bit in the last almost 10 years. This is due to just a lot of conservation efforts from consumers and more advanced and conservation types of fixtures, home fixtures, washers, bathroom appliances, things of that nature. So that's one of the issues whenever we talk about rates, why we have to increase rates to generate the additional revenue, because we see declining consumption, but yet more demand, a growing area for influence on our infrastructure. So that's one of the reasons why, one component of why the rates have to increase. One area I did want to talk about is stormwater. In particular, we have not increased the stormwater rates above 1% for several years. They've been about 1% every single year, but in 2020 we are proposing an increase to 2%. And I've illustrated here in these slides that you can see in our next 6 years from 2020 to 2025, we are increasing our capital program quite a bit. With an increase in our capital program, that's going to require more financing, more debt service, and therefore additional revenue is going to be needed to service that debt. You can see there, I've also has a slide that shows our operating and maintenance forecast. That's increasing in that division, in particular because of our blueprint program. One component of that is our green infrastructure and maintenance of that green infrastructure. Once those rain gardens are installed, they had to be maintained. The plants and the structures had to be maintained. The stormwater division has allocations in their operating budget for contracts and also city personnel to do that. As we add more, the budget grows. And finally, you can see there the debt service forecast related to the projects. We see a big kind of spike in 2023. We've got several projects planned for that year, $15 million in the Franklinton area. We're doing some work down southwest of the Arena District, and then some general neighborhood flood mitigation projects are planned for that year as well. I wanted to show here on this next slide a little bit about what I mentioned, the operating costs and the debt service costs. When you break things down, you can see here on both the water and the sewer side, the blue lines are the O&M, or the operations and maintenance costs. That's personnel, materials, supplies. And the red line is the debt service, which covers the debt for the capital projects. Just to show on the water side that they don't have as much debt service, but their operating expenses have been fairly consistent, have not been increasing like the debt service has. On the opposite side, on the sewer side, much more debt, just mainly associated because of our consent order compliance. But again, fairly steady increases of O&M there as well. This slide here shows how we compare to other cities in the region. And what I have here is broken down in our water charges. Our water charges here, we're kind of in the middle, Pittsburgh being at the highest, St. Louis at the lowest, and we're more on the lower end for the sewer charges. When you combine those and compare all of these communities, you can see where we actually fall at the lowest. So there's several factors associated with that. Number one is we've had a lot more time to get engage in our consent order. Since we entered into these back in 2002 and 2004, we've had 10 years, 5 to 10 years ahead of some of these other communities, where some of them are in the point where they're having to ramp up the rates like we did way back in the mid-2000s. So now we're kind of more of a leveling off period. And plus we've got different components about how we sell debt. Some are issuing more revenue debt, which requires a higher rate increase, versus GO debt, which we issue primarily. These do not include stormwater rates. This is just a comparison of water and sewer rates. Finally, what I'll touch on is our low-income program. Just to give you a little bit more information about this. Number one, our program is in line with a lot of other programs around the United States. Many water and sewer utilities do offer these types of programs. A 20% discount on the commodity charge is fairly common, and our criteria for customers to be eligible for the program is fairly consistent as far as a certain level of poverty level and certain forms and requirements, W-2s, income tax returns that are required to be submitted. So that discount, the 20%, they can apply for that and get that applied to the bill, but also if you're a senior, we have a service charge that can be waived. So if you're a senior and you're low income, you actually get the benefit of both. We try and do as much outreach as we can, getting out to recreation centers, anywhere, libraries, anywhere where we can, provide these to the public to get their hands on it. We put information in bill inserts on our website, social service centers, etc. And finally, the last slide just shows you, a little bit where we've been over the years. Our low-income discount program has been fairly consistent. It's pretty steady. We had a little bit of a dip, but we're seeing more applicants here in 2019. On the opposite side, we have seen more seniors. Reasons behind that are a little bit unknown, but it's good to see more and continued growth in those programs. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close my presentation and open it to any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Assistant Director Lee and Chairman Gladman. This we're going to turn to the question portion of the hearing. We did not have any speaker slips submitted for public testimony, so we did not have any members of the public that will be asking questions this evening, so we'll turn to a few questions from me. I think most of them you've likely touched on or answered in your presentation, but wanted to give it an opportunity to have some more explanation for a couple of these points. Could you give just a brief explanation of the Blueprint program and sort of an update on where we're at in 2020?
Sure. Our Blueprint program is, we did a lot of work in 2019 in the Clintonville area, and that's where we've been primarily in the last few years. And in 2019, we're happy to say we did a lot of installations, over 400 rain gardens we've installed, we've lined laterals, we've redirected many downspouts, over almost 1,000 homes there and installed almost 500 sump pumps. You know, the program itself is composed of those 4 pillars with the goal of eliminating sanitary sewer overflows per the EPA. So that program is in compliance with our consent order. So those pillars are lining the laterals, redirecting the downflow from the roof actually into the storm sewer, hooking up sump pumps. So we're happy to report we've had good success in Clintonville. Going into 2020, we're going to move more into the North Linden area. We've already been in design in that area, but we're moving to get shovels in the ground in 2020 there. Again, we'll start with the green infrastructure and the lateral lining. That's the first component. And then on the second half, we'll move into the Hilltop and Miller-Kelton neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Could you explain what the impact would be on ratepayers if rather than doing annual increases, we only did increases every 5 or 10 years or so, how that would impact the folks in the community?
Sure, and you know, some communities do that. I mean, we take the philosophy that a lower rate increase, you know, as we have for 2020, around 2% around inflation, is affordable, is manageable. It's not like we could go to 0 for too long. If we went to 0, what would happen is we could potentially see increases of 10 to 15%. Say if we went out and we didn't do any increases, you know, for 3 years. Meanwhile, we still have all these operating expenses and debt service. It doesn't put us in a good position if the economy, if there's something that happens with the economy. And then there's also, from a bill payer standpoint, rate shock. You know, it's a little bit less of a rate shock when you see an $8 increase a quarter. They may be able to do some consumption changes, change their behavior patterns, look at some of our programs we have to help reduce their bill through consumption changes. So those are the biggest components.
One thing you mentioned in your presentation is the differences between the rates that are going up for City of Columbus customers versus suburban customers. Could you touch on or just explain the differences there and why?
Sure. Our model is an industry standard model, and we're not unlike many other municipalities where we have a core city, City of Columbus, and then we're serving, you know, other suburban communities around us. And so we do a rate study, as does most utilities, a cost of service study or rate study. And what that study does is kind of tell you where your rates should be, if your rates are in line with the industry standard, and looking at consumption patterns. And what we see here in Columbus is there's actually a little bit more consumption out in the suburban community. There's more consumption, there's more growth going on out there. And we have to consider also the cost to deliver our services to those communities. They have the option to go and, if you know, they could go and hook up to another utility that they're located near. So offering that service, there is what, you know, a philosophical type of component, which is that, you know, the City of Columbus residents are the owners of the system, and ultimately they bear the burden of really paying back the debt that's owed. And you know, what would happen is we issue general obligation bonds for our capital projects, and if in the event that things went south, we have the property tax as a backstop in order to make sure that we meet our debt obligations. That property tax is only levied on City of Columbus residents. So we wouldn't levy that on the outside customers. We do have, on the water side, it's about 1.3 times for water, and then on the sewer side, about 1.1 times for those suburban communities.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions before we'll adjourn for the evening. Earlier you showed a 10-year projection of what the expectation of the rates would be going forward. Just to ask for, on behalf of the ratepayers here, what's the sort of confidence level that, you know, again, looking in back our 15-year history you had before that, those projections are what customers should expect moving forward.
Yeah, we feel very confident in our projections. Like I said, we've refined our modeling and our estimates, and we're aware of, some of the components that we need to keep in place in order to keep the rates low. For instance, we're aware of what we can actually deliver and the contracting community can deliver from a capital project standpoint. We're not going out there and saying we're going to do, way more projects than we can actually accomplish. So we've right-sized our capital program. That's a really big component. And also, as I mentioned, we have a really good relationship with the Ohio EPA where we take advantage of very low rates for financing these capital projects. So incorporating that, maintaining low operating expenses where we can, all those components go into our forecast that we feel confident about keeping those rates no more than 4% in the out years.
Last question, probably the most important one we're going to ask here this evening, and this is both for you, Assistant Director Lee and Chairman Gladman. I'll certainly allow either one of you to answer this. Based on all the information, obviously, that the board looked at, that the department looked at, is this the lowest possible rate that we can charge our customers for 2020, based on all the information available at this point?
We feel very comfortable with this rate increase. We, again, feel that it's reasonable and fair. I think we would be putting people in a different situation if we went lower than that, where we would have to increase rates in the future, like I said, up to 10 to 15%. So we feel like the design is equitable. And again, to our low-income program, we would encourage people to take advantage of that in order to help mitigate some of those increases. And also, look at some ways that they can change some consumption behavior. A lot of times, people aren't even aware of why, some components of their bill, or they may even have a leak. We offer a lot of things on our website and our department that people can talk to about, how do they check their meter? How do they compare their inside meter to their outside meter? How do they know if they have a leak? They can actually get a dye test where they can see if their toilet's leaking, and that will help save them money. But also, what types of fixtures can they install and take advantage of certain programs where they can get some of these low-efficient or high-efficient appliances to help reduce their consumption.
Chairman Dorans, I just have two comments, if I may. I think the advisory board is very sensitive to rate increases, and we have long discussions about the question you just asked about what's the minimum amount, and could we have it lower, but what's the long-term impact? And I think the strategy that the department has employed is embraced by the advisory board as the most prudent way to proceed. The other comment I'd like to make is about the differential rate for suburban communities. I know that at least one legislator would like to see that change, but having served on city council in a small community in Grandview Heights and chaired the finance committee for a number of years, I think it's important to remember communities like Grandview Heights and many other suburban communities really cannot afford to maintain their own system. So the differential rate is really fair. We wouldn't have the bonding capacity to make the improvements that we need, nor do we ever undertake having all the requirements to do treatment and so forth. So I think the contracts, which are negotiated contracts, are fair and very valuable to the suburban communities as well as the city of Columbus.
That's the conclusion of my questions for the evening, and since we had no public testimony here this evening, I just want to thank everyone who's in attendance and those potentially watching at home at the hearing. Certainly want to thank the Department of Public Utilities, Chairman Gladman of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, my staff, Kevin McCain, Hannah Miller, to help with the presentation this evening. Director Lee, thank you for your presentation. I encourage those who are looking for more information on this topic or potentially the discount programs that we've talked about here this evening, to visit the Department of Public Utilities website at www.columbus.gov/utilities, or call 614-645-8276. You can also reach out to my office at 614-645-8201, or you can email me personally at radorans, D-O-R-A-N-S, @columbus.gov. As they currently stand, ordinances number 2979-2019 to enact the sewer new water rates, ordinance number 2983-2019, which enacts the new sanitary sewer service rates, and ordinance number 2984-2019, enacting the new storm water fee rates, will appear for passage on our agenda at the next Columbus City Council meeting, held this Monday at November 25th at 5 p.m. Thank you again for all those in attendance, and this hearing is adjourned.